No one at the table noticed when Camille James stepped inside that evening. Snow clung to her boots and a bitter wind still clung to the hem of her coat, but the warmth inside the house didn't greet her. It confronted her. The same house she'd grown up in. Same bay windows dressed in garland. Same fireplace that used to roast marshmallows and now only roasted memories. 12 place settings lined the dinner table, crystal glasses shimmered in the chandelier light, napkins folded like swans. But not one seat had her name. Her mother looked up only briefly. "Oh, you came," she said, like Camille was a solicitor at the door. Her stepfather didn't bother pretending. He just poured himself another drink and chuckled. "We weren't sure if you'd show, so we didn't bother with a plate," he said. "You know, the dogs are out back." Camille didn't answer. She didn't need to. She walked past the scent of cinnamon-glazed ham and clove candles, past her younger sister Lauren, who didn't even make eye contact. Lauren's husband gave Camille the kind of polite smile you save for strangers on a plane. No one stopped her as she stepped through the kitchen and opened the sliding glass door. Outside, the cold slapped her like an old betrayal. There it was, a flimsy lawn chair and a paper plate, soggy mashed potatoes, bone-dry turkey, and half a roll. The dogs barked once, their tails wagging with more recognition than the people inside. She sat anyway, gloveless hands trembling only a little. Camille wasn't here to beg for a seat at their table. She was here to burn it down, with truth, not fire. She chewed each bite slowly. It wasn't about hunger, it was about history. 20 years ago, she'd made name cards for this same table. Handmade, glittered edges. Her dad, alive then, had ruffled her hair and praised every card, even the one she'd misspelled Michael on purpose just to tease her stepdad. Her mom had laughed back then. Had actually laughed. Ow? Not even a napkin? Camille stood and brushed the snow from her jeans. She walked back into the house like it still belonged to her, and in some ways it did. Nobody looked up. Her mother was bragging about someone's real estate deal. Lauren was giggling like a wind-up doll. Camille stepped to the table, pulled a small brown box from her coat pocket, and set it dead center, between the wine and the cranberry sauce. Then she leaned forward, voice steady. "Check under your plates." The room stilled. Her stepfather scoffed. "What is this, a game?" But his hand moved. One by one, plates were lifted. Underneath each one, an envelope, cream-colored, thick, their names written in black ink. He opened his first. The smug grin evaporated. Her mother's eyes darted across the table, alarmed now. She snatched hers and tore it open. "Where did you get this?" she hissed, the paper shaking in her hands. Camille didn't flinch. "Under the false bottom in Dad's desk," she said. "Where you left it." The documents were damning. Original trust papers, dated signatures, photocopies of transactions and handwritten notes in her father's slanted pen. It wasn't just legal, it was personal. It was a resurrection. Her niece, only 12, stared silently at her mother's envelope. No one breathed. Her stepfather stood, finger raised, voice cracking. "You think this proves something? That man didn't know what he was doing near the end." "That man protected me," Camille said flatly, "and you've been living off his work ever since." Weeks ago, she'd gone back to that house under the pretense of collecting boxes. Instead, she sat at her father's old desk and followed a feeling, a tug behind the drawer, a compartment she barely remembered. A deed, a photo of her as a child, legs swinging next to him on a porch bench, a letter, and a napkin, soft ivory, embroidered in red, C. She'd placed that napkin right there, on the empty spot at the table meant for her. No one laughed now. Her mother spoke again, low and cold. "You went through our things." "I went through his things," Camille replied. "You just buried them in your house." She didn't raise her voice. Didn't cry. She just adjusted the napkin with her initials, stared her mother down, and said the one thing she'd held in for years. "You erased me." A pause. "But my father wrote my name in ink." Then she walked, slowly, her coat zipped halfway, her boots still damp from snow, but her spine straight and her heart clear. She heard someone call her name, once, maybe twice, but she didn't turn. She just walked until the cold met her with open arms. In the silence of her car, headlights on, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not revenge, not vindication. Relief. But the story wasn't done. She didn't drive home. Instead, she let the road carry her to a place no one else remembered. Not anymore. Her father's cabin nestled deep in the pine woods just north of Fair Hollow. It had been shuttered for years, forgotten by everyone but her. The key was still hidden where he'd taught her to stash it, beneath the porch board marked with a chipped nail. She unlocked the door. Dust and cedar hit her like memory. The rocking chair still stood by the fire, his flannel shirt still draped on the back, and there, in the kitchen drawer, swollen from winter air, was the compass he gave her when she was 13. Brass, still ticking, still hers. And beside it, an envelope, not just a letter, an entire second deed, the cabin, the land, a quiet bank account, untouched and completely in her name. Taped to the back, a hand-drawn map, a red X between two birch trees behind the cabin. Her father's note read, "If they forget who you are, come here. This is where your truth begins again." Camille didn't wait. The next morning, under a sky the color of ash, she followed the map her father had drawn. The snow had fallen heavier overnight, blanketing the forest and muting every footstep. Her breath came in small clouds, and the crunch beneath her boots was the only sound that reminded her she was still moving. Past the cabin's edge, where the trees thinned, she saw them. Two birch trunks, pale and tall, standing like sentinels in the clearing. Between them, buried beneath layers of ice and soil, her fingers found what she didn't realize she'd been aching for: a rusted metal lockbox. She carried it back inside the cabin with both hands, arms straining against the weight and years of rust. It wasn't easy. It wasn't supposed to be. The box creaked when she opened it, and inside was something simple and profound. A small leather-bound journal wrapped in oilcloth and a key. Not a house key, not a safe key. Something older, the kind that once opened places no longer marked on modern maps. Etched on it were the words, "Forge your own table." Camille held it for a long moment, the phrase echoing louder than any insult she'd endured in that house full of fine china and colder hearts. They had tried to erase her from the will, from the table, from the family itself, but here was the undeniable truth. In her hand, in ink, in metal. The kind of truth that outlasts performance and polish. She didn't go back inside right away. Instead, she stood on the porch for what felt like an hour, letting the cold burn her fingers, letting the clarity settle in. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolve. When she did go back inside, the morning had fully arrived. Silent, pale, and still. She brewed coffee on the old gas burner, the one her father insisted on keeping despite her mother's protests that it was outdated. Some things, he used to say, work because they're made to last. She remembered how proud he was of this place. This space he called a refuge, even when things back home grew toxic. The journal sat unopened on the table for a while. She stared at it, uncertain, not because she feared what it held, but because she already knew it would hurt. Still, she flipped it open. The entries were brief, to the point, but heavy with meaning. November 2nd. She didn't know I was watching, but Valerie closed her laptop the moment Camille walked in. Something's off. November 8th. They're isolating her. Subtle, but real. I asked about the education fund and got brushed off. I think they've touched money they had no right to. November 15th. I told her, follow the truth even when no one else sees it. Truth doesn't shout, it waits. The last entry was taped to the back cover. You'll know what they took when you see what they tried to erase. Camille ran her fingers across the words, her jaw tightening. It wasn't just a diary, it was a ledger of a man slowly realizing his daughter had become invisible in her own home, and trying, in his own quiet way, to preserve her place. She packed the journal, the deed, the box key, and a copy of the map into her leather satchel and drove into town. The roads were dusted with fresh snow. Her tires left the only tracks. She stopped in front of a building that hadn't changed much. First Union Bank of Fair Hollow. Inside, the scent of old paper and lemon oil still lingered. At the front desk, a young receptionist looked up and smiled politely. "I'm looking for Mr. Winslow," Camille said. "Arthur?" the woman blinked. "He's semi-retired, but he's here today. Want me to let him know?" "Tell him Camille James is here, Jack's daughter." The receptionist paused. Something shifted in her face. "Oh," she said softly. "Of course." Arthur Winslow came out 5 minutes later, older and thinner, with hair whiter than she remembered, but eyes that hadn't lost a bit of warmth. "Camille," he said, almost whispering, "I remember when your dad brought you in to open your first savings account. Still playing cello?" "Not really," she said with a smile. "Life got loud." They sat in his office, and she placed the journal and the property deed on the table. He didn't say much, just opened the journal, skimmed the entries, then let out a low breath. "I always had a feeling something wasn't right after he passed," Arthur murmured. "Your mother came in with paperwork not even a week after the funeral. Said it was time to consolidate. Brought your stepfather too." "She never had authority over this account," Camille said quietly. "And neither did he." Arthur nodded. "Your father authorized our team to maintain long-term archives, physical copies, stored offline. I can get them. Give me 20 minutes. While he vanished into the vault, Camille sat in the same leather chair she'd sat in at age 9. That memory returned. The way her father held her hand as they filled out the deposit slip together. He'd called it a grown-up move. Now she was making another. Arthur returned carrying a thick leather-bound ledger. He placed it gently on the desk, opened it, and pointed. "This account was created in 2004. Your father contributed every month. See? His initials. Every line." Camille scanned the records. There it was. His handwriting, initials, even marginal notes. Then things changed. 2 weeks after his death, the deposits stopped. Withdrawals began. Small at first, then larger. By the time it ended, over $160,000, 0 cents had been taken. Every transaction signed in Camille's name. Her throat tightened. "That's not my signature," she said. "It's a scanned copy." Arthur tapped the page. "We verified that too. The IP address used to submit the e-signatures matches your stepfather's home network. Camille, you have every right to pursue this." "I intend to," she said, her voice calm but steel beneath. He slid the ledger toward the scanner. "We'll get you certified copies of everything by end of day." Before she left, he added something quietly, almost like a blessing. "Jack always said you had more grit than anyone else in that house. You coming back like this? That grit's still there." She stepped back into the cold with a new kind of warmth building in her chest. She wasn't done, not yet, but the scales had started to tilt. Back at the cabin, she laid out every document like puzzle pieces. The deed, the journal, the scanned bank records. She took a photo of them, then pulled out her phone. There was someone she needed to call, a nonprofit colleague from years back, someone who had once said, "If you ever need legal firepower, the good kind, the kind that doesn't sleep, call me." Camille dialed. The line rang twice. "Camille James," came the voice on the other end, and "been a minute." "I've got something big," Camille said. "Probable fraud, a trust, forged signatures. I need this to move fast and quiet." There was no hesitation. "Send it all, tonight." Camille exhaled slowly. "Thanks, I will." Camille didn't sleep that night. She stayed in the cabin, her documents spread out on the table like a war map. Outside, the snowfall thickened, blanketing the world in a silence so deep it bordered on sacred. By morning, the cold had turned bitter and sharp. But Camille's focus had only grown steadier. She loaded everything into her bag: the journal, the certified ledger copies, the deed, and drove across state lines to a place her family never thought she'd return to. Her mother and stepfather had made a critical mistake. They assumed Camille wouldn't come back. They assumed the girl who used to sit quietly at the far corner of the table, smiling through insults and invisibility, had vanished for good. But what they didn't realize was that she'd never left. She'd just been waiting. For her moment, for proof, for power. That moment came 2 days later, at the courthouse. Camille arrived early, dressed in black slacks and a charcoal coat that matched the calm on her face. She walked up the marble steps, with the journal in one hand and a folder in the other. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Her mother, Lucille, sat prim and composed in a designer pantsuit. Brent, her stepfather's son and Lucille's lapdog, lounged beside her in an expensive blazer, scrolling through his phone like it was all a waste of time. Their lawyer, a sharp-tongued man with a $1,000 haircut, smirked at Camille when she passed. Murray Rosenthal, Camille's attorney, met her at the bench and whispered, "They think they've got this in the bag. Let's change that." The judge called the session to order. "This hearing will evaluate the authenticity of trust documents related to the James estate," he announced, "and determine the lawful trustee and beneficiaries of its assets. All parties will be heard. Let's proceed." Lucille's lawyer was first to speak. With a dramatic flourish, he presented an email thread allegedly written by Camille to her stepfather years prior. In the email, she demanded inheritance money in blunt, threatening language. "You owe me. I don't care what it takes. Give me what's mine, or I'll go public." Gasps scattered through the room. Camille didn't move. The judge turned to her. "Ms. James, do you have a response to this?" She nodded. One. Rosenthal stood. "Your Honor, we've had this email analyzed. Metadata shows it was fabricated 13 days ago from a device registered to Brent Carter. The IP address used to send it is tied to his home router. The timestamps don't match the era they claim to reference. It's a forgery." The courtroom stirred. Brent shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, were you aware of this?" I must have been hacked," Brent stammered, suddenly pale. "Convenient," the judge said dryly. "Let's continue." Now Camille stepped forward, the leather journal held in both hands. She opened it to the page she had marked with a faded holly leaf and began reading aloud. "December 24th, 2020. If you are reading this and Camille's being shut out, know this. She is my legacy. If Lucille or Brent are holding the reins, something has gone terribly wrong." The silence that followed was different this time. Heavy. Lucille's face flushed red. Brent looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. "This is all a performance," Brent snapped. "Camille never cared about the family business. She just wants attention." Camille turned to him calmly. "I cared about being treated like I existed. That's more than I can say for the way you treated the man who built your life." Rosenthal stepped in. "Your Honor, we have financial records showing that Brent Carter withdrew over $140,000, 0 cents, from James estate business accounts within 48 hours of Mr. James's passing. Violating probate regulations? He did so using Camille's forged signature." Brent's attorney tried to intervene, but the judge lifted his hand. "Enough! Until further notice, the James Estate Trust will be frozen. No party is to make withdrawals or transfers of any kind. Furthermore, based on the documentation, original deeds, certified ledgers, and handwritten statements, it is the court's opinion that Camille James is the rightful trustee." Lucille's mouth fell open. Brent's posture collapsed. Camille stood perfectly still, her fingers resting gently on the journal. Court adjourned. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Brent waited for her. His breath was visible in the cold air. "I didn't know she'd gone that far," he said. "Lucille, she threatened me too. I was scared." "You didn't lose to me," Camille replied. "You lost to your own choices." She didn't linger. She turned and walked down the steps, the journal held close to her chest, not hidden anymore, but displayed. A record. A weapon. A truth. Weeks passed. The legal dust settled. Investigations into Lucille's fraudulent filings began. Camille kept her name out of the papers, but not out of the fight. She didn't turn the Vermont house into a trophy. She turned it into something her father would have loved. A refuge. A place for women like her, those who'd been ignored, dismissed, erased, to come and remember who they were. On Christmas Eve, the house was filled with light. A long oak table stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling. 12 guests, women with complicated pasts and unshakable spirits, gathered for dinner. Laughter echoed. The scent of rosemary chicken and warm cider filled the air. At the head of the table sat a single white plate, untouched. A folded card rested on top. It read, "No one eats outside." Camille looked around, and for the first time in her life, the room reflected her truth, not a manufactured version of family, not a pageant of appearances, but warmth, integrity, and justice, the kind that arrives not with noise, but with a whisper and a journal. He smiled, and this time it wasn't bittersweet. It was whole.